Hello, everyone, and welcome to the I'm Not Bossy, I'm the Boss panel. So excited to be with you all today for another day of inspiration, powerful speakers, and exciting programming. This panel focuses on exploring how gender gaps look for women across industries and varying identities, and what we can collectively leadership roles. My name is Shania, and I'm a teen advisor from Houston, Texas. And today, I am joined by Michelle King, the Director of Inclusion at Netflix, Céline Talabaza, the CEO of Noble Panacea, Claudia Chan, the creator of S.H.E Summit and the How We Rise Leadership Program, and Miki Woodard, the head of Good Robot at Bad Robot Productions. Thank you so much for joining us today. So we know a gender gap in most professional industries, and that gap widens even further for women when you look across intersecting identities. Can you share more about that from your experience and perspective? Claudia, would you like to start?
Sure, yeah. So I guess there is the perspective of, especially right now today, what's happening with Black Lives Matter, which is the first thing that sort of comes to mind in all of this. I mean, we're all aware of the massive global gender equality gaps that exist in workplaces, in communities, and across the world, first world, third world. But I know for me personally, it's been definitely a very emotional period, because not only I think as women and in our work in doing gender equality work is that there's like you want to champion Black Lives Matter and really be thoughtful about how we're showing up to support that as a fellow woman of color, as an Asian American. But also I've also been reflecting on a lot on what it means to be an Asian American woman in all of this. And in a way, the way that women were a launching pad and a launching platform for diversity and inclusion back in like the 1960s, in a way, Black Lives Matter is almost a launching pad for other ethnicities to also think about our experiences as women of color. And so as a fellow woman of color in this intersectional sort of landscape, I think I'm in the process of balancing how do I really show up and work on my allyship for Black people, but at the same time honor also my, in many ways, challenging relationships with white privilege, and also the racism I've also experienced as an Asian American. So it's very complex. And so I think giving all of us, this is a very emotionally difficult time, as we all think about, okay, gender equality is already a movement in of itself, but when we add the additional intersectional layers of, how I show up for all these dimensions of that intersectionality, to really be with that process. I think we might have lost Shania. Did we lose Shania?
I think we did. I'm happy to jump in and share some thoughts. I don't know, Miki, did you want to say anything, or Céline, just before I do?
Oh, please go ahead.
No, Michelle, you go ahead and I'll follow you.
Okay, great. I was just going to share, I think, to come back to the question around, the challenges and how they're compounded by difference, and, in the intersection between race and gender, creating entirely new and different experiences of inequality in workplaces. I think the fundamental issue, and it's something I share in my book, The Fix, is that workplaces were never designed for difference, right? So if you look at the history of workplaces and how inequality actually works in organizations, they were designed to support sort of an outdated ideal standard, which is a white male standard, something I call the Don Draper standard, if any of you watched Mad Men, right? It's this 1960s ideal of what good looks like when it comes to leadership. And the problem is the more you sort of differ from that standard, whether it's your race, gender, ethnicity, sexual orientation, or even in terms of how you behave, right? In terms of being assertive, dominant, aggressive, which tends to be associated with Don Draper, it's much more challenging for you to advance at work because you differ from the standard of what good looks like. And so that's really the problem we have to solve. We've got to sort of shift this idea of what leadership, of what power, of what good looks like, and really try and create organizations that are much more based in terms of values rather than in terms of some outdated standard that actually it doesn't serve women and all women for that matter, but it also also doesn't serve men. And so that's something we don't really talk about enough, I think, in terms of the challenges that this outdated ideal we're clinging onto creates for men, both in terms of behaviors and in terms of some of those sort of physical demographic attributes.
That's so great. And it's so true how, leadership is so important, and it's so important to recognize our identities and include that within when we are leading and guiding others. Would anyone else like to chime in?
I will, and just say that I agree with what both Claudia and Michelle said, and thank you for sharing those thoughts. I think, you have to be very, very intentional. They are absolutely right that corporate America was not built for most of us. And so to break those barriers and to be women that have the opportunity to invite other women in, we have to be very deliberate about using our platform and using our time to create space. I know at Bad Robot, we have something called the Bad Robot Rule, and we have to recruit in alignment with the US population. And that means that 50% of the women, of the people that we see for any role are women. And that means now that we have 63% of our company, our department heads are women. And so you have to put a line in the sand and not back away from it, because it gets hard, especially when you get to the intersectional part of our identities. But you can do it, and we can do it if we strive to do it together.
Beautifully said, Miki. Thank you so much. And now we'll go on to the next question. So, what advice would you all give everyone tuning in on how they can help break down the gender barriers girls and women face, not only for themselves, but for their entire community?
Céline, do you want to chime in?
Of course. I do think that, first of all, education is the most important thing. Learning, sharing, keep on learning, keep on sharing. Education is key to achieve genuine women equality advocacy. And school is really where I understood I had the opportunity to grow every day. I also believe projection becomes reality. So setting goals for yourself, finding out what your passion is, and try to develop skills around it. Working in a domain that is your personal passion will make your life much easier. Be clear about your strengths and work around it to perfect and elevate it. Being close to your mentors, not being afraid of asking questions. Sometimes we are afraid to ask questions because we think that everybody else has the answer, and most of the time it's not true. And by asking questions, we are not only helping others, not only ourselves, but others as well. I would say that to keep on breaking barriers, it's important to raise voices, to continue to have this kind of conversation, and this beautiful platform that you girls have created, and in order to have meaningful conversations. And Sir Fraser, our founder, who was awarded the Nobel Prize of Chemistry, he is doing a lot of work in terms of mentoring women in his laboratory and promoting women in science. And this is a kind of personality we want to see more. Both of his daughters are PhD scientists, and I'm sure they've been inspired by him. So it's not my personal story, but it's really meaningful for him. And I do think men supporting and empowering women is equally important as women supporting women.
And I'll chime in too on that breaking barriers question. And I learned this over the years, which is, and I just turned 45. So marking hopefully the halfway life, second half of life period. But is that, so I keep on saying, what would I tell my younger self as I, join this amazing Girl Up community, is that the greatest barrier that you will face actually in life, I believe, is actually the one in the mind. It's actually internal, and especially for women. And as social media and as, there's just so much access now to information, the comparison, the imposter syndrome that really you will become the sum of your thoughts, and your thoughts and what you believe about yourself will determine who you become. And so the greatest barrier to win is actually, as whether you're 13, 15, 25 years old, is to actually start like having a strategy for that internal leadership. And when you are rooted and you have that foundation, you really will be able to move through and move around any external obstacle. And remember, the higher your dreams are and visions are, and whether it's like closing the gender equality gap, it's your own leadership for yourself, for your family, for your community. The greater the vision, the bigger the goals, the more friction there's going to be, right? There's going to be more challenges. So also reframing that obstacles are opportunities. And every time you feel fear, every time you feel scared, every time you feel exhausted and you're about to give up, is see that as something, as an obstacle, as an opportunity to build you, to grow you, and start developing that internal mindset. And even through this conference, every nugget that resonates with you is a tool that you can continue to go back to and use.
I just want to jump in, if I may, because I really want to leave every single young woman, and I use that word purposely because you are a young woman, the message that, the one takeaway, if you remember anything I share on this panel, is that it's not you. It's your workplace. And so as you enter your career, as you enter life, it's really important, building on what Claudia said, and even Céline and Miki, it's really important to carry that with you. And I think, from my perspective, the greatest barrier you'll face is actually recognizing that and understanding that, because workplaces weren't designed for difference, you could do everything right and still not succeed, because there are inherent systematic barriers that, prevent women from advancing. And it gets that much harder as you add in and layer in difference. And so the goal is to really know what those barriers are. One of the biggest challenges we have right now is a lot of leaders are in denial. They don't know what the barriers are. And so if I could arm every single young woman coming into corporate America, and into any organizations around the world with an understanding of what those barriers are, that awareness will serve you really well. So being a part of the Girl Up community, attending forums like this is such a great way to get to know the barriers that you'll face.
I also think that when you are passionate about something, you're persistent. So find what you're passionate about. What do you want to change? What do you want to do? Be persistent about it. And then when you're in those rooms, know your power. From day one, use your voice, use your intuition. You have the right answers. Don't tell yourself no. Let others tell you no. Know your power.
Thank you all so much. That was so inspiring, and I know everyone watching is ready to take on the world. And for our final question, what will it take to ensure that women of all identities and roles are in leadership roles over the next decade, in the boardroom, in our political systems? Claudia, would you like to begin?
I'm the starter in this conversation. I love it. So, I think that, the one thing that I wanted to, my takeaway, and I think that this really, again, represents all identities, is that, we've had a very masculine definition of leadership, right? As we think Girl Up as a leadership platform, and we really need a new definition of leadership. And what we teach a lot here at S.H.E Summit is whole life leadership. And that really, we need to treat our whole lives as the organization we are leading. And women make up half the world, and humanity is not operating at its potential because people, whole beings, are not operating at its potential. And if we ever want to get to gender equity, gender equality, and equality for all people, then we really need to realize that we need to, like, that the whole life leadership is really important. So that is starting with your mental health. I teach that your mental health, and we all, just like we have physical health, everybody has mental health. Our thoughts are our mental health, right? Is what I was saying before, is like that is a leadership priority. Like our family, our well-being, so it's got to be real, holistic, a lot more holistic. So that is my, is really, as you lead yourself, it's not just about the change you want to affect. It's not just about, that title or that, closing the parity gap in the workplace. It's about whole life success. And my greatest concern for all of us as women and girls is that we're taking care of ourselves and our well-being and our mental, physical. We juggle so much, and we continue to add on people's plates without taking stuff off of women's plates. So whole life leadership, treat your whole life as the organization you are leading, is my closing point. I'm sorry I took so much time.
Thank you so much, Claudia. Miki, would you like to add on?
I think I would just add on to say, and I know that we are wrapping up this panel, it is absolutely looking at your whole life. It is absolutely knowing that balance is important, and that making choices is important, and that coming from what you love, that's going to make all the difference to how you sustain this. You're in this for a career, and a career lasts for 20 years. You're going to have ups, you're going to have downs, you're going to make changes through all of it. Go with your intuition and start with what you love.
Beautiful. And do any of the other panelists have any final words?
Yes, I can only testify what I personally experience when women get together in a room. Not only the creative ideation process is very rich, but the level of energy is so high and the flow of communication is smooth and efficient. In my experience, diversity in genders, but also backgrounds and nationalities has proven strong business results. So women need to envision that they can, because they absolutely can. I'm seeing this every day with my friends and my colleagues.
And I'll just share very quickly, to solve inequality, to really solve it once and for all, it's going to take leadership. Leaders drive cultures and organizations, and they're really accountable for the inequality that's experienced in those organizations. And so to every single one of you, you are the next generation of leaders, and every single one of you has the opportunity to redefine what that looks like. And, we're seeing world leaders now like Jacinda Ardern really showing us the way, proving that attributes and values like kindness matter so much more than outdated models of leadership. So I encourage every single one of you to define what leadership looks like to you, and to really hold on to that as you embark on your careers.
Well, thank you all so much, Michelle, Céline, Claudia, and Miki, for this important conversation on leadership. It is clear that when young women and the world, we all have what it takes to be a leader, and these extraordinary women are proof of that. Thank you all so much again.